Order this King George County Board of Supervisors CIP work session. Is anyone like to comment for public comment? Is anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Is there anybody online, Mr. Dines? Is there any correspondence to my colleagues concerning this? If not, I will close the public comment period, and I will ask for from our board for amendment to the hold on. Sorry about that. Amendment to the agenda to add one more item between 6 and 7, a discussion about food trucks.
Move to amend the agenda per the chair's request.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, guys. Next up, state of the capital budget revenue. Dr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this is a little out of the ordinary for a normal CIP process. In fact, it's so unordinary. You'll also notice that we're pretty late in the fiscal year to get the capital budget completed. And there's a lot of rationale behind that. I brought before you all, in addition to your CIP spreadsheet, 3 documents where you see September 2019, which is our tonnage report for landfill revenue in 2019. Then also included the tonnage report for our landfill for as of September 2020, which is our most recent report for landfill revenue. I also did a little handwritten math that I wanted to present to the board. If you'll look at the bottom line that's highlighted in yellow, you'll note that to date we are $1,198,120 less in revenue than we were last year. And by the time that we close out the fiscal year, I'm concerned that that gap is only going to widen. In addition, if you look at the line just above that, 2020 quarter 1 to quarter 3 total, we have generated for this year $6,242,670. This is telling because our debt service is just slightly over $6.3 million. So until I got access to the September report, there was a real concern that with the landfill closing and commercial traffic slowing down, we really were trying to determine if we were going to be able to even meet our debt service payment from landfill revenue without going into fund balances. Understanding confident now that as we close out quarter 4, we're at least going to be able to meet that debt service payment. Certainly you can understand our suggestions that's captured on the CIP spreadsheet where we're looking at a pretty austere capital budget for this year. As you all are aware, we usually cash fund our capital budget each year from excess landfill revenue. Well, that excess isn't here. And so because of that fact, you'll note that on this year's spreadsheet, you'll see CAO recommendations that was discussed with the Planning Commission and discussing with the board tonight with what at least the staff administration feels is the projects that absolutely should be funded and those that can probably wait an additional year when we can see healthier revenue coming from the landfill. So with that being said, Madam Chair, I'll stand by for any questions regarding landfill revenue or the state of our capital budget.
Do my colleagues have any questions? Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not directly related to the budget data here, but does it sound like, are we still tracking the extra containers that we ordered with the CARES Act funding for early November so that we can hopefully get it reopened on the convenience centers reopened partially on Sundays?
Yes, Madam Chair. Matter of fact, Jeff Jenkins briefed me last week. He's expecting for the container to be in, and we expect, I think it's the second week of next month, that we're actually going to return to opening on Sundays again.
And we are planning a full-scale media blitz on that, right? Because that's one of the #1 complaints we continue to receive is the convenience centers not servicing our constituents fully on the weekends. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else have a question? Mr. Granger?
What is the, could you explain what the approved hold means under CAO recommended?
Yes, if the board will recall, when we started running into the recession, I sent out an email to you all advising that we were going to take some pretty stringent actions in order to prevent the county from shipwrecking, because we had absolutely no idea how the pandemic was going to affect us financially. So in addition to revamping the whole operational budget, we did put a hold on major capital purchases for the fiscal year, and those included the tennis court reconstruction and the elementary roof. And now that we are on the back end, I don't want to say at the back end of the recession, it's really a policy decision on if the board wants to go ahead and move forward with those projects or if the board wants to remain in a steady state. I haven't had an opportunity to review the books. Again, we still have the treasurer's office that's working on getting books and everything closed. But if the board did decide that okay, let's turn it back on, let's move forward with these large projects, it would be coming out of fund balance. It's not going to come out of cash funding as we had initially planned when the board wanted to move forward with the projects.
I do have one question. This is concerning the King George schools. I remember several of my colleagues and myself had wanted to have some kind of spreadsheet to show how the schools, things that need to be replaced over time and how they would budget them. And has Dr. Benson given us any kind of spreadsheet, or like, I'm going to give an example, the roofs on the schools, they have a lifespan. So do they have people coming to inspect them, preventive maintenance, and then have a plan of how, like if they have 15 more years of life, making sure that's in a spreadsheet to tell us when we're going to have to fund those items?
I'm sure those discussions are being had, but of course, that detailed of a plan, I have to assume is going to take a little while to put together and make sure that it's pretty comprehensive. So we don't have that available immediately or tonight, but I'm not going to speak for the schools, but I can share that those concerns have been shared, and I know that there's having those discussions at the maintenance department with the schools.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to stay on our radar.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? All right.
All right. Well, Madam Chair, then that being said, that turns it over to department presentations, starting with Parks and Rec.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight I bring Parks and Recreation's updated capital improvement plan. A number of our facilities are beginning to show their age and are in need of maintenance and renovation improvements, including Barnsfield Park and the Citizen Center, which have both been in operation since the 1980s. Conversely, we also have newly acquired property adjacent to Barnsfield Park in the form of a 166-acre parcel for park expansion and a new 2-acre home site currently slated to become a museum. Here are our requests for the next 5 years. Approved by both the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, the King George Tennis Center still awaits funds to be appropriated to reconstruct the facility. These are the only public tennis courts in the county and home to the King George High School tennis teams. The coaches have expressed concerns that the Battlefield District may not allow competition on these courts due to safety concerns with the cracking. Additionally, the renovation will include pickleball lines, which will increase programming opportunities for Parks and Recreation. Barnsfield Park has nearly doubled in size thanks to the Harry Nice Thomas Mack Middleton Route 301 Bridge project. 166 acres to the north of the park and a 2-acre home site on the river were acquired in December 2019 as mitigation for the 4 acres lost by the county and the Virginia Tourism Commission. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee has created a draft master plan that would be brought to public feedback in fiscal year 23. Design work would also be done that year. Redevelopment work is recommended for fiscal years 24 and 25. Proposed improvements include the build-out of Wayside Park, additional ball fields in the new Barnsfield, and a bathhouse on the Barnsfield property near Wayside Park. Sealston Sports Complex is our most popular park for travel teams and Parks and Recreation soccer. This fall, we have 10 rentals a week for baseball and softball. King George Little League is on site, as well as KG United Soccer. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, Parks and Recreation soccer was canceled for this year. The use of the picnic pavilion has increased as groups look for outdoor venues to host meetings and gatherings. We propose adding a playground in fiscal year 21 and a sand volleyball court in fiscal year 22. Staying at Sealston, with the increased field use comes an increased need for more practice and play times. Without lights, we are unable to offer more times due to darkness. At this time, only Hunter Field has lights that would serve football and soccer. That is owned by as a county field. Time there at Hunter Field was completely booked prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope to add lights to one soccer field and one additional baseball or softball field for $350,000 each in fiscal years 22 and 23. Sitting empty at Siddell Brooks Junior Park is the old animal shelter. The Master Naturalists, Master Gardeners, Co-op Extension Office, and Parks and Recreation are looking to redevelop this facility into an outdoor education center. The requests for CIP funds are to be used as matching funds to supplement grants and awards in fiscal year 22. The Citizen Center is home to Parks and Recreation. Over the past 15 years, repair and maintenance have been deferred. Current upgrading needs are to replace the ceiling and lighting throughout the facility. By moving from fluorescent to LED lighting, there will be a savings in electrical costs. The center divider wall is on its last leg, as it is original equipment from the 1980s. If it were to fail, then the ability to divide the facility and host 2 events at once would be lost. The sidewalk and ADA ramp are wearing and do not offer a smooth walking and rolling surface. This is a priority need for the department in fiscal year 21. Changes in safety codes and the age of equipment has led to the need to replace bleachers at Barnsfield Park, modify fencing heights at both Sealston and Barnsfield, and add dugout roofs. These upgrades will limit the liability of the county in regards to baseball and softball. In FY21, we request $227,500. In fiscal year 22, there's a need to upgrade lighting at Barnsfield Park Field A to meet current safety codes with the appropriate foot candles of light. This $600,000 would renovate Field A and add lights to Field B. Currently, King George Parks and Recreation holds an MOU with the school board to utilize school facilities during non-school hours. This limits the majority of our programming to evening and weekends due to lack of facility space. Now, due to COVID-19, we have been limited in which programs we can bring back, as school safety protocols are set by the Virginia High School League and are more restrictive than other governing bodies. The need of a recreation center was noted in the 2017 needs analysis. The Infrastructure Advisory Committee will be reporting out to the Board of Supervisors next month with plans to reuse various buildings in the county, but Parks and Recreation has had their eye on revitalizing the old middle school for some time. Renovation of this site in fiscal year 24 for $7.5 million with $250,000 in planning work completed in fiscal year 23 will allow gymnastics, the county shooting clubs, wrestling, karate, all to find a home in a modern space. The 2017 needs analysis by Parks and Recreation noted that an off-leash dog park is as a high priority. Currently, citizens will run their dogs off-leash at various parks, which leads to fear amongst other park visitors, dog waste being left on sports fields, and complaints to both Parks and Recreation and the Sheriff's Office. Creation of a safe, responsible location near the center of the county will benefit dog owners and non-owners alike. We have that as a fiscal year 22 project. Finally, built in the early 2000s, the playground at Barnsfield Park will need replacement in the coming years, as 20 years is the useful life of such a structure. For fiscal year 25, a $125,000 replacement is noted. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you have to the best of my ability.
Does anybody have any questions? Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Clark, excuse me, you and I spoke before the meeting began, or the work session began this evening, and I sent you the text of the Facebook post from the town of Warsaw to let my colleagues know. Evidently, RCC partnered with the county and the town of Warsaw and the high school to refurbish their tennis courts, and that's an RCC site. Well, King George High School also happens to be an RCC site, so hopefully, Mr. Clark, you can follow up on that and see if there's any kind of opportunity there to partner with them to get them to help us out, maybe with our tennis courts.
Absolutely. As you finished telling me that, I was very excited about the possibility of seeing if we can't get
even just a little bit of help.
Some help to make sure that we can get those courts done in a proper fashion.
Yeah, thank you. And I support that. I've played on those courts. I'm not very good at playing tennis, but my family and I try to get some exercise whenever we can and medal through it. So yeah, the courts need improved. The next slide, the Barnsfield, Wayside, Roseland Park upgrades. When you say build out of Wayside Park, do you mean that currently wooded lot next to what we knew as Wayside Park and then where the houses start? And is that did I see at some point there's a plan for a boat ramp maybe there if that gets cleared, or what are you talking about there?
Not a boat ramp. Their initial plan that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee has come up with is to include a picnic shelter and parking area there. When they came up with that, we then, about a month later, found the original 1984 master plan, which included the same, actually in 1984, it included tennis courts in that area, but to add a picnic shelter and parking lot to that area so that Wayside Park then becomes the water access point, and that the museum property is hopefully not seen by our citizens as a place to go and access the water, even though it is on the water, because it's just not conducive for folks to be congregating, and that we'll only have those big parties, more or less, on the Wayside Park side.
Gotcha. The next slide, Sealston Sports Complex upgrades, the sand volleyball court. I think that would be a nice addition if we could get there at some point, because I know a number of volleyball players here in the county are having to go to the YMCA on Butler Road, I believe, has a sand volleyball court. So we're sending people that way. For Sedell Brooks Park, the Outdoor Education Center. In addition to that, do you have any idea an estimate on what a comfort station / pavilion at that park would cost?
At this point, that is outside of our 5-year plan, so we have not completely priced that. There's a whole realm of possibilities. We did do some investigations into the idea of a precast concrete structure and vault if there was if we could have found a way to attach it to CARES Act funding, and if we had an abundance of funding. The structure, they were talking about $40,000 to $50,000, but that didn't include any site prep or getting water or electricity to it. The run from the nearest fire hydrants are at Perkins Corner Wastewater Treatment Center or on Government Center Boulevard. They are both 700 to 800 feet away, linear feet, that we would have to run through the woods. So I'm not sure, that would be a service authority expert, whether we could run straight line or they would need to work with the topography. I don't have any idea how much that would cost.
Gotcha. Then just, let's see, I had 2 other things. The lighting at some of the ball fields, if we can partner with the Little League on some of that, that would be great, because they do benefit from that as well. But it is needed. It keeps us from having night games or tournaments that would stretch into the evening, and especially if it's like a state tournament, that would be beneficial. And then the last thing is the dog park. Yes, please. I dealt with a lot of dog park issues in the past 2 weeks. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, thank you for your presentation tonight, and I'll try not to beat you up too bad. First, I have some questions for Dr. Young. Dr. Young, on the plan that you gave us, you have the CAO recommended, so everything's marked no except for the tennis courts are marked hold. So this is what we're going off now. What exactly are you looking from us tonight to say if there's a certain thing we want to move forward with?
Yes, sir. I was looking for a vote on the capital budget tonight.
Okay. So looking at what Mr. Clark presented tonight, I appreciate what you submitted about Barnsfield, Wayside, and Roseland Park. But right now, I believe we're postured, even with this timeline, I think we should wait till after the bridge is complete. And I say that because whatever is not utilized by Maryland in this bridge, that property at Wayside is going to revert back to the county. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, how things are going to be configured, and we may be able to take advantage of some of the changes out there to better fit our needs. Overall, with what you presented us tonight, looking at the revenue shortfall. It is what it is. It's a shortfall. I think we're going to be really, really tight this year. So as far as Parks and Rec, there are things in here that I believe were considered safety issues, like if there's playground equipment that children are playing on and it's really not safe, either it needs to be removed and replaced or removed. But that's a decision we need to make. We do have to address safety concerns or structural concerns that are out there. Now, the Citizen Center, I know that is utilized quite often by citizens, by groups. It brings in revenue as well. It's a revenue stream for Parks and Rec. So if there are issues there, there's a difference between niceties and things that would enhance, and then things that are a safety issue or things that are simply failing that need to be addressed. So I'd like to get some kind of metrics on that. What's actually, well, this would be nice to have, or these lights would make the room look prettier, versus, well, there's a light fixture and the wiring's bad on it and the damn thing could cause a fire. That it's that difference that I'm looking at. I did like what Ms. Kupka said about partnering with Little League. I would bring that same concept down to, hold on, bear with me. Yeah, the Sealston Sports Complex lighting. For the $350,000, if I know there's soccer leagues, there's a lot of things that are getting popular. There's groups out there. If they're renting these fields, maybe we can have a dedicated revenue stream. Those fees to utilize that are directed directly to lighting, to where that league could expand itself and play at night or something to that effect. But as of right now, unless it's a safety or security issue, I'm going to hold fast on not moving forward with anything. That's all I have. Thank you.
So to answer for the items on the safety side, the one thing, like the bleachers at Barnsfield Park, at the time we purchased them, they are 4 and 5 riser high. They were legal at the time. They are now not. 3 riser is the height, and if you go to 4 or 5, you must have handrails and back fences. So if you go to King George High School, for example, at their softball field, they have 5 riser high bleachers, but they have side and back fences so that you can't fall off the back. When we constructed Sealston Park prior to my arrival, the ball field fence from the dugout down goes to 3 foot. Immediately after opening the park, we realized that overthrows were going over the 3 foot fence and foul balls were coming over the 3 foot fence at the bleachers, where mom and dad and grandma and grandpa are sitting watching, and they're not ready to react to a foul ball.
Sorry to cut you off. So on that, do those type of situations present a liability issue for the county? So if code has changed legally, and I wish maybe Matt can answer this, but are we grandfathered in, or are we facing a real liability challenge?
The understanding I have is that because they were legal at the time, we can continue to use them. Could someone in today's society push that envelope? Possibly. I think that would be a better question for Matt to answer. But like the netting that we added at Sealston as the response is now starting to fail. It's showing age. So we're either going to go into user fees from the renters or into activity fund if we need to go further to replace the netting as another temporary fix at Sealston. But the next step would be to actually take that fencing and keep it at the 8 foot height all the way down to the access gate, which would be safer. We've seen that in Major League Baseball and minor league baseball, where now the nettings that used to just be the backstops run all the way to the foul poles because they've had those issues. And they have all their certifications and court documents that say if you go to a baseball game, the team isn't liable because you should be aware that balls could be leaving the playing field. But to keep our citizens safer, for the Citizen Center, the center wall is our most dire need. I have been unable to get someone up to actually come and give us a concrete price on it. So it's built into that number, but it's not something that anyone in Fredericksburg does. over in the King George area. So getting someone up to come and really look at it and tell us what we need to upgrade it, not just repair it. It's at the end of its use, really is at the end. It's difficult to move. We won't allow citizens to move it, when in the past we would allow citizens who are renting to readjust the room. Our staff is the only one that will touch it.
So going back to a comment you just made, back with the ball fields, you were talking about, it sounded like a different revenue stream, the activities fund and something else. So if it was not funded through CIP, do you still have revenue streams to where this situation could be addressed?
So Parks and Recreation is 4 budgets. Citizen Center is on its own. Our administration budget, completely taxpayer funded, and then athletics and programs are revenue activity funds. So those funds are funded by the users. So you pay for an activity, we use those funds to pay for that activity. Certain programs make money, and so we use that money typically to redirect and cover things that don't, like a special event, or Easter egg hunt, where there's no registration fee, but it's a great community outreach. We started, as of July 1, the board approved back in February of this year, the ability for us to charge our sports teams that are renting. So that new fee has been collected. We were able to turn around. We had one team recently that was one of the biggest pushbacks. We put in new L-screen nets. We had the frames, but the nets were failing, so we bought the new nets. I put them on myself after hours because my son was practicing in front of the team, and the coach says, well, why are you replacing those nets? I said, well, they were failing, and your team actually helped pay for these with your rental fees. And he was like, oh, okay. Now they could see where their money was going. So it's $25 a practice. We're not getting to replacing very huge items with that, but the money those baseball teams are giving us is going back into the fields that they use, because that's where all of our things are in. There's not a budgeted line item to say, hey, here's $50,000 in the budget for us to repair ball fields every year. So that money's being we've starting to gather more money there, but it's $25 a practice, 10 runners. We're making about $2,000 a week this fall, which is going to get us places, but it's not going to get us far. At the end of the year, if we have a good year and programs like Play It Smart and summer camp do very well, we may have a profit per se in Parks and Recreation. When we have a profit, it goes into a recreation activity fund balance account. And so there is funds in that account, but that was the biggest thing, is those funds were paid by users of our facilities, or users of our programs. So the goal is to put those funds back into the programs, not into our facilities. The last thing that we purchased with those funds was, prior to my arrival, we bought our new 15-passenger van, which was used to serve our summer day camp and our trips. So it was a program item. One of the things we would like to replace, I actually haven't even discussed this with Dr. Young. We have an old Dodge Stratus that we got from somebody as a hand-me-down for years. It is nearing the end of its useful life, and our department would probably be better suited and would better utilize a minivan in that spot. And we are looking at the idea of replacing that vehicle, but we're not running any small trips at this point, so there's no rush to get that until we're back running trips. So the Stratus is serving us fine right now to make runs to Walmart and to the post office.
So I'm going to apologize because I'm going to go down a rabbit hole because I didn't think it was going to go this way, but I need some clarity. So we have new facilities that we're looking at on here. And from what I'm hearing is every time facilities come up, it sounds like that maintenance is just going to grow. Even the lighting, we have to replace lighting because I guess the code changed. So every time we expand on these things, we have to take that into account. But you just said this programs account, so y'all have money in there, but you want to put the money back into the program, not into the facilities. But these programs are using or utilizing our facilities. So I think there does need to be some kind of balance in there to where maybe maintenance, of the facilities that they're utilizing should be part of that cost, and put that in there, because we can't simply just expand Parks and Rec. Getting back to what Ms. Bender was talking about earlier with the schools, we need a maintenance plan and figure out, all right, we're going to buy this stuff, but it does have a life cycle. At some point, playground equipment is great, but we need to realize it maybe is only going to last 10, 15, 20 years max. So that's all things we need to take into account. But
Depending on the facility, depends on whether it's program used. So like baseball and softball fields are not a King George Parks and Recreation program. We don't offer baseball. King George Little League does that.
Right.
So King George Little League has always reimbursed us for costs. Now they are on a set $10 per child that they pay back, rather than us trying to add up nickels and dimes for how many bags of chalk did we use and how many bags of turf did we get down. So it's a much easier budgetary item for them. I know they've passed that on to their users. I'm one of their participants. So then when they give us that money goes back and is paying for the supplies that they're using. When we replace a home plate, they're over $100 a piece, because they're, a solid wood-filled home plate. A set of bases is $199 if we do all three of them. So baseball and softball can cost a lot of money. We actually have a proposal going to TAC tomorrow with work that we need to do to the field at Brooks Park to improve it so that we can offer it to travel tournaments that are interested. And that total package is $10,000.
Okay. So,
Mr. And if I may, Madam Chair, I think that I'm hesitant to really try to discern between something being a safety issue versus a maintenance issue, because I don't know if we really brought the experts into the conversation, that being the building inspector and the fire chief. We need to have a conversation with the county attorney to determine liability. And I think that a lot of these questions about, hey, is this a safety issue or is this a liability issue? That can be a conversation that's had with the staff. Let us go do some site visits with a team of experts, and we could come back to the board if there is such a severe safety concern that it needs to be addressed immediately. But I don't think that at the moment I'm not hearing anything that's so severe that is of the highest priority. But again, I could be wrong, and we can make that determination upon doing site visits.
So I will leave off with this regarding Parks and Rec. I agree with the hold on the tennis court reconstruction, and I would like to consider parks safety upgrades, but for a hold, not to allocate funding, but that to just be put on our radar coming down the road. I'd like to have that looked at.
I was going to suggest a report. It's when you have time to do the site visits to have a report.
Basically down the line to what Dr. Young was just speaking of. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stoneham?
I agree a lot with what Mr. Bush said. With our budget shortfalls and everything, we're not quite sure what we have to work with for our cash coming up here. People said I'm pretty conservative with money. I've even been called tight. But I agree. I mean, if it's not a safety issue, I think we really need to be very careful. The Citizen Center, I mean, you're looking at tiles falling down. We've had, back in the good old days when we can have big gatherings, we had our microphone being held together with a bobby pin or something, So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that definitely needs to be repaired, and, that's been kind of an ongoing thing. The tennis courts, if they're unsafe to use, do we need to close them or do we need to fix them? That's almost a safety issue there. Barnsfield Park, I agree. I mean, we don't really know what we're going to have there, outside of the museum once they get done with tearing everything up and putting stuff back. But I just think we just need to be very careful, with doing anything new. I mean, fix what we have if we need it, and if it's not usable, we need to close it. And with people being, outdoorsy a lot more and everybody trying to be outside, the tennis courts, I think, would probably be, a pretty positive thing. I know there's a lot of people that use those tennis courts. But, like I said earlier, if it's a safety issue, we need to close them. But I would rather see them open. I think that's it. I just think we need to be very careful with moving anything new and going from there. And let's just fix what we have. So that's all I have right now.
Mr. Granger?
Mr. Clark, thank you for coming out. Honestly, with the situation we're in right now, I couldn't move forward with any projects for this year. So I apologize, but it's just an unfortunate reality of the situation. So
I understand all of these things in here, and I also understand that we just don't have the revenue this year to do the replacements and the fixing and everything. And the tennis court, I wish we could put it that if we do have money, that's the first thing that we fix. Because as someone who was an advocate for the new track and a coach, the Battlefield District and VHSL is very particular about their surfaces, and being a coach of teams that never had a senior night and never had a home contest, it can be very disheartening to players that don't get to have that experience of having to play in their own home field. So if we could at least put that as the first one to be done, if we do have the money for it. And I just wish we could do everything here, because I think it would be really positive, but we just don't have the funds this year because of everything that's happened. And so that was the only thing I would ask, is that the tennis center reconstruction be first on our list if we do have the funds in the new year. And then the only other question I have is on the playground equipment. I have been to many playgrounds that have quite old equipment and they're still used and they're fine. Is there any reason that it only has a 20-year life cycle? Is it just newer equipment?
Typically, codes will change and things will need to be replaced. We did $5,000 worth of work, I want to say. Well, we made some replacements at Barnsfield about a year ago. We had a slide that broke, and so we replaced the slide, which the type of equipment that was there was no longer being manufactured, so we had to change the slide, and they kind of retrofitted a newer slide into the old one. And in doing that, we had to rearrange the playground because the slide had to fall into a different footprint. So the slide and the fireman's pole switched locations. And then there were a couple other swings that had failed prior to my arrival, and we replaced those and upgraded those. It's just, that is typical lifespan. If you'll see the schools are in the same boat. They're looking to replace playgrounds at about the same age.
Go ahead. Mr. Granger, then Ms. Kupka.
it's not about Parks and Rec. I'm sorry. I'm misremembering something. So I would like to go back, if everyone doesn't mind, about the two approved hold items. That's a total of $1.5 million that was approved against last year's capital improvement funds. And that was the funds that were from July of 2018. I'm sorry, no, there's nothing through July of 2019 through June of 2020. How many? Do we know what our capital or our intake was from the landfill from that period, from July 2018 through June 30th of July 2019. I apologize, I keep doing that. July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020.
Yes, sir. I don't have those numbers immediately available.
Okay.
But as you can see on the handwritten document, by the close of the third quarter in 2019, we had $7.4 million. And I know that we closed out with a healthy balance at the end of the year.
In the capital improvements?
Yes, sir.
So I guess that's what I'd like to know, is what that amount was, because we did approve those last year. And I understand at that point, to me, it's not necessarily taken out of the fund balance because it was originally obligated. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was earmarked at least for those projects because those dollars were coming in. And I understand maybe we didn't receive the actual revenues we were talking about, but I don't know if it was 1.5 million that we lost, and maybe it was. I just don't know off the top of my head. So that's what I'm trying to get better understanding for. And I apologize. I'm just not remembering.
Yes, sir. I can look that up while the discussion is taking place.
Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Clark, could you do us all a favor? I'm very familiar, excuse me, with your 2017 needs analysis from having been the grant writer, but could you please send the 2017 Parks and Recreation needs analysis to everyone on the board and make sure that Dr. Young and Mr. Britton are copied as well? Because aside from probably the improvement that you just talked about at Barnsfield with the slide and so forth, it does highlight extensively the safety issues and concerns in that report, and there are pictures as well, and I think it at a minimum, that would be a good starting point for anybody trying to figure out what really are priority safety concerns.
Absolutely,
you.
ma'am. I can get that first thing in the morning. Just as a summary, the plan that I have, the 5-year, this is our 5-year plan. Obviously, we are aware in Parks and Recreation that there is not an overabundance of revenue, and we are presenting our plan. If things are not funded, they will be delayed, and we will continue to have those needs. As in like the rec center. The rec center, this community does not have a full-fledged rec center. At some point, hopefully, we will build one in the tenure that I'm here. It will continue to stay probably as the 5-year number until we are at a planning stage of that. Obviously, there are other needs. The courthouse is a priority and already at bond. So we understand as a department, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee also understands that, and they just want to make sure that we are presenting a full picture of what this department will need so that we don't come to you and go, oh my gosh, this has broken and we need to replace it now, when we knew that today, and that happens in the middle of 2022. So that's why we're trying to present full pictures.
So I guess the decision point is a no for all these, but the only thing I ask is the report back to tell us what the safety concerns are. And if the board is okay with, if there is money next year, that the tennis courts be the first one to be added on.
I'd be amenable to that, but as Ms. Kupka said, if there is any opportunity to partner, and we can,
Yep. Okay.
I would love to find out if we could do that.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Young, what should?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The next up is Dr. Benson from King George County Schools.
Is Dr. Benson online? Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes. Dr. Benson?
Okay. I'm glad to finally get through. Thanks for. It's very tough on my end to hear, so I apologize if I'm jumping in inappropriately. Are you? Is this my time to
Dr. Benson,
present, or do you have questions?
it's your time to present. Go right ahead.
Okay, I appreciate the time. The school board, on behalf of the school board, the 2 capital improvement projects before you were those that were approved both by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, I believe in 2019, those being King George Elementary School's roof replacement and the annual replacement of our 6 school buses that, based on assessment of them mechanically, mileage, and age, are in most need of replacement. And we do that to avoid deferring replacement and getting into a situation where in one fiscal year we need to replace more than we can afford to replace. So those are simply the 2 requests that we've advanced. We understand that the economic uncertainty forced the delay of these, but again, these were two requests previously approved by both Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors, and we simply have requested they be placed back in queue, us presuming that funding may be available to complete those 2 requests. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Mr. Bush, I knew you were going to go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand the hold on the roof replacement. The school bus replacement, though, I have some concerns about. We're looking at $624,000, and it doesn't seem that the entire school bus fleet is rolling right now. Schools haven't been open. And it's my understanding that based on the school board's meeting last night, that they will be opening up K through 2, and that would be on November 5th. I haven't seen a plan or heard of a plan for 3 through 12 eventually going in. So regardless of all that, because that's school board business, what I'm looking at is buses rolling. So given our revenue constraints, and given that not all the buses have been rolling, that would affect the mileage. So being that mileage is one of the parameters that they look at for scheduling replacement, I would at a minimum, I understand that they may need some new buses, but I would like to cut that number from 6 to 3. I would like to cut the number of school buses that they're requesting in half.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Anybody else? A question? Mr. Granger?
Honestly, I had a similar question. I was just going to ask Dr. Benson, how much use are the buses currently seeing? And so, or do you anticipate it seeing for the rest of this calendar year, I guess, or fiscal year for schools?
I'm having a very difficult time. It's the lower frequencies are very strong on the audio.
Okay. I'll re-ask my question a little bit louder. Hopefully you can hear me now. I was kind of mumbling. I apologize for that. I was just asking how much use the buses are going to see this year, or even up to this point, Dr. Benson. Have they been getting? I don't think they would be, but are the buses receiving any use currently? And how much use do you anticipate seeing buses using through the rest of this school year? Just for trying to determine the need for replacement from a usage perspective.
Okay, so again, well, I'll just answer your question right now. And since the beginning of the school year, we've had limited buses that have been used. Most of those have been special needs buses that have transported students who, according to their IEP, had services that needed to be delivered in a specialized setting, like a private day school. I believe I heard Mr. Bush say that, and he's correct, that last night the school board confirmed the opening of our schools, grades kindergarten through second, for in-person learning. We do need to distance students on those buses, but we will be using, I believe it's 15 or so, or 19 general school buses to accomplish the transportation of students 4 days a week. In that case, that's about half of our fleet of general school buses. And then the school board, or I'm working with a task group that is proposing options for the school board to consider starting second semester. So it's likely, if all goes well, and if the school board feels it's appropriate, then it's likely second semester, the entire fleet would be back in service, albeit transporting most likely half the number of students they customarily do due to the pandemic. I don't know if that answers your question completely. I'm happy to take any follow-up question if I didn't.
I think that gets to what I was trying to get information for, so thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Benson, thanks for coming out virtually and participating in our work session tonight. I, too, have been following the school board work sessions and meetings on reopening pretty closely. So I have two questions. The first is, how would having those additional 6 buses, if, say, you were to keep for another year those that you normally would be rotating out because they frankly weren't heavily used since last March, and then had the additional 6 buses to accommodate the social distancing requirements while transporting students, would that at all improve the school board's ability to have more students return to in-person learning?
I guess the fair answer to that is that it could, provided we had drivers to drive those additional school buses. In fairness, the intent of this request as a CIP item has been, since I've been in King George County, it's been really a priority or an expectation of the Board of Supervisors when I think back 8 years, that we not get back into a situation that happened once upon a time where the state basically said we had to replace, as a county, we had to replace an inordinate number of buses that was a one-time burden and kind of threw the entire CIP kind of out of kilter. From what I understand, that was just before my arrival here. So I think where you're going, and that an additional 6 buses, even for a temporary period of time, could be a source of resource. We would simply need to, and it is difficult to find folks to drive those buses, to employ them. We tried to maintain substitute drivers that we could certainly put into play, but I think the reality is we would, I'd be hard pressed today to tell you that I would be able to train and have pass the licensure test 6 drivers by the beginning of next semester if 6 additional school buses were provided.
Thank you, Dr. Benson. That actually was going to be my second question. Knowing how difficult it is for you to procure or hire and retain bus drivers, is that if we were able to do that and could temporarily give you 6 more buses to work with, would you actually have the drivers to drive them? So those are all the questions I had. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stonehill.
The buses are how much, Dr. Benson?
I'm sorry, Mr. Stonehall. I couldn't make that question out.
So they were 100 and something thousand apiece?
No, I don't believe that's the case. The amount that's there, typically there are 6 school buses we aim to replace. I don't remember the figure being that high per bus. And there are some years where if a special needs or a specially equipped bus is in that queue, that cost could fluctuate a little bit. But I don't know that it's that amount per bus. I can try to get you the breakdown if it's not already there on the document that I thought you had. You may just have an aggregate amount in front of you, I presume. But I can research and get the actual quotes per bus or a per bus cost, if that's helpful.
My memory, at least, is that historically it's been about $600,000 for 6 buses a year, and that's been the 4 years I've served on the board. So if you tell me that it's less, that'd be a surprise to me, and I would ask where those dollars went if that is the case.
Well, let me not hazard a guess then. I'll certainly tomorrow morning I can find out from Ms. Piccarello, the transportation supervisor, what a bus is costing at a per bus cost.
Thank you.
Dr. Young, you may have the spreadsheet I sent, which I think in those description pages, does it not break out the cost? Or
That's what I'm looking up now.
okay.
Dr. Benson, I know like an ambulance, there's a lead out time for when to get the ambulance. What is the lead out time for a bus if we purchase them?
I'm thinking back to past years, and of course I've got to go back too. But I think those orders typically, it was 2 or 3 months perhaps, but again, we were working with the summertime as far as delivery. So I imagine there was a little bit of scheduling flexibility since they weren't needed until the fall. But that would be my best estimate right now. Now, knowing, and I've learned a lot about product procurement in the last several months, it seems like everything is in short supply or is in a delayed delivery status. So I think, to be fair, I would need to call the company to get you a fair answer these days, because I imagine it may be quite different than traditionally the delivery time.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again, Dr. Benson. So I initially brought up 3 buses simply by looking at usage. So from March to most likely January, if the school board goes back to full school, is virtually a year of no mileage. Even if you used half the fleet during that period, that's still half the mileage that wasn't attained during a normal rotation. So things I've been hearing from the school board is they're going to open up when it's safe. I have not seen a definition of what defines safe. Even if they do attain safe conditions and they open up in January, are they still going to be providing a virtual option, which means not all the students would be utilizing school buses? And is school going to be 5 days a week? Are they going to be traveling the same amount of time and attaining that normal mileage that they do? I don't think so. So I think there's been a banking, I guess would be the best word, of mileage. Now, I don't want to get away from a rotation. I think this rotation was created with purpose. It has served us well. But I think that right now, looking at this, by cutting it from 6 buses to 3, we would be basically getting $300,000 back that we can put into the CIP. And I think that would serve the community better than just having 6 new buses in the fleet. When looking at the metrics of it and the time frame, it's a year. I mean, the rotation happens every year, but it's a year of mileage that we banked. So I agree. They do need buses. I'd like to keep the rotation going, but I would like to cut that number in half based on this reasoning. Thank you.
How do everybody feel about that?
Did you want me to respond to that, or?
Yeah, go right ahead, Dr. Benson.
I don't. I understand the logic Mr. Bush has laid out. I would only remind that this was this request I assume you're considering tonight was one that was issued well before the pandemic or well before any any of the current context evolved. So the need to replace the 6 buses that have been identified, remains, because that need was identified before the delay. And I would certainly understand, it makes sense to me moving forward, the mileage bank, so to speak, certainly is attributable to this school year, that in your next CIP, assuming you're maintaining or trying to get back to a normal rotation, that would be a variable that you would consider at that time. But irregardless, any replacement that we can keep on pace with, I think, does help us as a county in terms of planning. Like Mr. Bush said, it's not prudent to get away from routinely replacing your most aged buses and those that are causing the most in terms of mechanical upkeep, to not only maintain a safe fleet and a reliable fleet, but to also not incur repair costs and things like that are just kind of throwing good money after a bad situation. But I don't disagree with your logic, Mr. Bush. I just was trying to point out the timing. I assume that this is just a request that's being placed back in queue that was approved more than a year ago, based on the need identified at that time.
And Madam Chair, just to answer the RFI from both Dr. Benson and Mr. Granger, reviewed the CIP submission packet. There's no breakdown of cost per bus or any type of substantiating documentation. It just was a summary of the request and justification for the request.
Mr. Granger?
I apologize. My memory clearly, I'm getting older, so I'm not remembering right. I look back at an older CIP. So Dr. Benson, I apologize. Looking back, it was $556,000. That was the request about 3 years ago. And so it looks like it has increased in cost per bus. So, those things happen, I understand. But I just wanted to give you that information at least, so you don't need to look it up. And I apologize, my mistake.
No worries. I can get the exact pricing, or at least the estimated pricing, and update that if you all, in response to your question, to make sure you have that.
Mr. Bush?
So thank you, Dr. Benson, for the clarity you provided. But I do understand that, this was needs identified a year ago. But again, it was put on hold because this is real monies that we have right now for lack thereof.
Were school buses put on hold? I apologize for interrupting.
No.
They were bought, 6 were bought last year.
No, he said needs were identified last year. I'm sorry, did I misspeak?
No, you did say needs. It's just that we always, every year we have 6.
Right.
I mean, that's just what it is.
And
in perpetuity.
that's what I wanted to clarify. This wasn't based off of needs that were identified. This is a simple rotation that is in there. So it's not like we have a bus that, like if we have a fire engine that, keeps blowing a head gasket and this thing's in a shop all the time. That's not the situation. The situation is we have a rotation of 6 school buses every year. So yes, the need was identified, but really that's not as clear as it could be. It's that last year we identified 6 buses with, to be put back onto this rotation, and we would continue with the same cycle. So I don't want the general public that's watching this to think that, I'm sitting here saying, well, there's 6 school buses that have been identified that are problematic or have issues, and I'm not willing to replace those. That's not my posture at all. My posture is that it's 6 school buses that are on a normal rotation, and even though, this does go back to last year, the monies is real money today, and we have a shortfall. And that $300,000 would go a long way in addressing other county needs at this point. And I think that the 3 new school buses would be more than sufficient to address the school's needs as well. I think that's the prudent thing to do. So I stand by my petition to this board to drop it from 6 school buses to 3.
Any thoughts? Ms. Kupka?
Believe it or not, I will go for that, Mr. Bush. 3, thank you.
How does everybody else feel? I'm okay with 3 also. Because also, the one other thing the buses haven't been doing is all the sports teams haven't been using them. So that's another mileage that's taken off of the odometers per se.
I'll go along with 3.
All right.
Madam Chair, if I may, since there's a delta in the room regarding the cost per bus, I'd recommend that the board, rather than make a discrete number, just provide the schools a budget. And if the board want to move forward with cutting that budget in half, then move forward with a vote for $312,000 towards the school bus replacement program.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Granger?
I know, Dr. Young, you're looking for a vote tonight. Would it behoove us, though, to wait for Dr. Benson to provide us that per bus cost if it's not exactly linear, if there's some economy of scale built into that, so that we could understand what, like if 3 buses were to be 330,000 instead of 312 or something like that, before we make a final vote?
I'd ask for the vote that at least will give us the permission to move forward with the public hearing, and if there are adjustments that need to be made, it can be made prior to the public hearing.
Tracking. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Benson, one last thing, just so I could have this in my radar, because I asked earlier about the schools having a replacement program plan. For the school roof replacement at King George Elementary, what is the time frame, or do you have a time frame for that? Because it's on hold on our list.
What is the time frame for having the roof replaced?
Yeah, well, with normal maintenance for big projects like roofs on buildings, you'd have a lifespan. Like my house has a 30-year roof. So what is the lifespan for that roof? Do you have a plan for that lifespan? We put it on hold here, but what's the lifespan for that roof?
You're talking about the new roof.
I'm talking about
the warranty, you mean, or what would be the warranted time for the new roof?
King George Elementary has roof replacement.
Yeah, how long has the current roof been on, or how long would we expect the new roof to last?
Well, how long has the roof been on, and what is the lifespan when the roof was put on?
Okay, so the current roof, my understanding is the original roof. of the building. So at this point, the roof is, I'm going to estimate 22, maybe 23 years old. And that is those are the trays. The problem part of that is that the seams just have seemed to pull apart to the point where we can no longer, keep them spot repaired to try to prevent the leaks. So that's the age of the current roof. I assume that the new roof would come with a warranty or would have an expected lifespan of at least 30 years.
All right, thank you, Dr. Benson. Mr. Bush?
I hope that answers. Again, it's tough for me to hear on my end, so please help me if I'm not understanding the question correctly. But
So I appreciate what Dr. Benson said and your question, Ms. Bender. Prior to Dr. Benson coming on board, if you look at previous budgets from school boards, there were a lot less. But that was problematic because over the years, the school board was not budgeting for maintenance. And all that came to fruition when Dr. Benson came in and you looked at all these busted sidewalks, air conditioner units not working, roofs leaking. Maintenance was not accounted for. And I guess it was by design, their budgets were significantly less, but that's why. So moving forward, I understand why you were asking about a maintenance plan so that whenever we do get to replace a roof or something of that nature, that we're also taking into account not the cost of the structure or what we're having to do, but what is the ongoing maintenance plan and the cost associated with that into the future. So for 20 years, probably with over a decade of no maintenance, I think 30 years from what Dr. Benson said is pretty accurate.
And Dr. Benson, I go with what Mr. Bush said. He said it very well, but I also was added on to that with when you purchase something, the idea of you look at all of the buildings and have them cataloged when it was purchased, and then when does the county as a whole and the CIP have to look to when we would need to replace it so that we can budget for it, for those big ticket items like a roof replacement. So that was what I was looking for also.
Okay. Well, this one, so I apologize, Ms. Binder. I didn't mean to not answer a question accurately. Again, it's just tough to hear, but we do, I think as Mr. Bush described, we do try to look forward. There are certainly, the playgrounds and things like that in the out years of your current formatting for CIP considerations. The middle school expansion, as an example, when I first came on board, that was being discussed by that board. So we have tried to look forward and be proactive in anticipating needs, particularly big ticket needs. We've also been, I think, good stewards looking inward to try to, Mr. Bush mentioned like sidewalks, concrete work, paving at Potomac several years ago. These were all expenditures that we made utilizing any fund balance or anything that we could within our operating budget, so we didn't have to come back to the Board of Supervisors for additional funding. And then one other, because it was a partnership and I think it's worth revisiting, is that we are continuing to see savings as far as energy, given our energy performance contract that we entered into to finance the several upgrades, energy related upgrades to our building, to include the new air handler on top of the air unit on top of King George Elementary. That was a significant expense that we did not have to include in a CIP because we were able to finance it using avoided costs, energy costs, because of upgrades we made throughout the division. So we thank you again for your support in that.
Thank you, Dr. Benson, for answering those questions. I know our virtual can be challenging right here and be able to hear sometimes. Does any of my colleagues have any other questions for Dr. Benson?
I don't have a question. I know it's on approved hold, but I really think, I know it's a big ticket item, but I think we should move forward with the roof replacement. If it's leaking, it's going to continue to damage interior structure. That's going to have to be maintained or replaced. I think that's going to cost a lot more in the long run if you don't spend the money now to fix the roof. I don't think we should leave it on hold. I think we should do this and get it done. Otherwise, we're going to have more problems like we have at the old middle school, other buildings.
Ms. Kupka?
Can I just add some of my own personal experience with regard to the King George Elementary School roof? My daughter, a couple of years ago, played indoor soccer there, and I think, is Mr. Clark still here? If he may be able to tell us whether he's even still able to offer indoors. I know the Parks and Rec sports programs are on hold right now due to COVID, but are you even able to offer indoor soccer there anymore? Because for some reason I thought you were not because of the roof leaks, because I was there for a game where the floor is all wet and the roof is leaking on us while we're trying to watch a game and maybe watch the kids play until the point where it kind of was not safe. So could you elaborate on that a little bit, please, Mr. Clark?
Yes, so I arrived October 2018. The decision was made prior to my arrival that we did not play indoor soccer at King George Elementary the winter 2018 to 2019. We did play last year, 2019 to 2020, and got the season in before the pandemic hit. I don't know if there were some temporary repairs that were made in the gym area that allowed us to do that, or if we just didn't have rain and snow like we had the previous years. But we were able to play last year, and it is our intention to play this year. But yes, to be able to know that there will not be leaks would be very beneficial for our department as well.
So thank you.
I know I had Gary out there going up on that roof often in response to reports of leaks, and he just would continually try to Band-Aid those things back together. It's the seams and those metal pans that are on that roof that just over time, they just wear out. You know, the crimped seams, I believe.
Dr. Benson, from what I understand from metal roofs, when I did research for the infrastructure, is that they really have to be maintained they could have a very long life, but they have to be maintained. And if we didn't maintain them a long time ago, that's probably why the lifespan is over.
Well, I don't know. I've been here 8 years. I don't know, and I certainly wouldn't want to blame in arrears anybody for not doing something that I don't know to be factual. But I can promise you now, we maintain our facilities as very best we can, and we do value the taxpayer dollars that are put into providing the facilities, and we want to care for them.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Benson. Ms. Kupka, did you have anything more?
No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Clark for his commentary, and thank you, Dr. Benson.
Mr. Bush?
So I was just having a sidebar conversation with Mr. Granger. So I'm trying to figure out what's available. So if this was approved last year, is suitable funding available that if the board were to say, let's move forward with the roof replacement, we have funding to cover that under CIP, do we?
Yes, sir. Again, we have fund balances, so just like going into your savings. So the money is there if the board wants to move forward with the roof replacement. And admittedly, we're in a much better place than we were 60 days ago, because if the board will remember, that's when we were first going through our audit, and we were also going for courthouse financing, and fund balances is king when you're getting your credit reviewed and pursuing a bond. Now that we've gotten through the credit rating review and the bond is closing, if the board did want to dip into the savings to pay for the roof, we definitely have the money there to do so.
So I think Mr. Granger brought up a good point. I mean, this is a current infrastructure, so it's not like we're going out and buying something brand new. This is something that is in our inventory that if we don't take care of it, the problem's only going to persist. So if the money's there, I think I don't ever want to wind up in a situation like the old middle school. So if we know the roof needs to be replaced, we have the money to do it. It was in the plan last year. I concur with Mr. Granger, and I think we should move forward with the roof placement.
And Mr. Bush, that's why I brought up the whole conversation, because as everyone knows, I'm a big proponent about preventive maintenance and not having the same mistakes we did in the past. So would anybody like to make a motion on that?
I move to approve the King George Elementary School roof replacement for the fiscal year 2021, or fiscal year 21 CIP budget.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Benson.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night. All right, Dr. Young, administration, correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to respond to Mr. Granger's RFI regarding revenue that was received from in our capital fund last year. The landfill generated $8,660,990, minus our debt service of slightly over $6.3 million. That left us a fund balance of $2,300,000. The board then approved a capital budget last year of $3,772,191, with $1.2 million of that being taken out of the gas line, if you all recall, and $877,000 being taken out of fund balance. So that $877,000 reduced our fund balance. It reduced our revenue that went into the fund balance last year to $1,483,433.
Could you give me that number, the 1 million?
$1,483,433.
So moving forward, this project would kind of wipe out all of that then, for the most part.
For the most part, yes,
For
sir.
the most part, okay. Just making sure I understand, so I appreciate it. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Young.
And board, so for the administration, we too have recommended that admin projects be put on hold, save the Fairview Beach River Stabilization Project, which you all are fully aware of, but just for background for the general public, the county has received a grant from FEMA to pay for phase 1 of the stabilization of Fairview Beach, which has suffered deterioration due to erosion over the last few decades. As a requirement for the grant, the county must provide $1 million upfront to do the work, and as the work is completed, FEMA is going to reimburse us the monies. So the $1 million actually will be an upfront cost, but at the completion of the project, it's basically a zero-sum game because we'll receive those monies back into our capital budget.
Dr. Young, do we just have to make a motion on that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Someone make a motion?
Move to approve the Fairview Beach River Bank Stabilization Project as presented.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
And the only other project I have for administration was just a discussion about the courthouse. The bond has been completed. We expect to have the funding in the county's accounts by November 15th. So we just capture it on the CIP just for administrative purposes.
Thank you, Dr. Young. So with that being said, we will move on to information technology. Mr. Dines.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm just going to skip right to our one project that went through for approval through the Planning Commission and with consultation with Dr. Young previously. And this is just the second year of our 3-year contract with our providers of the off-site secure replication of the county servers and their data, the email spam filter, the virtual machines that each server has. And all of this, of course, is in a guarded facility outside Richmond, Virginia, which is home to server monitoring, the patching, the antivirus, all of our web filtering, and our deployment services for our desktops to our users and our servers so we can get in remotely. And of course, it will alert us if anything happens. And that's pretty much it for that one project. Again, it will be up again next year for the 3rd year of the contract. and that's $117,103.56. I'll take any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions? Dr. Young, does that one also take?
It's already approved, Madam Chair. So.
Okay, so I just want to clarify and make sure. All right, so we'll move to community development. Ms. Hall? Thank you, Mr. Dines.
Thank you.
Good evening. Department of Community Development 2125 CIP request. Next slide. Quality customer service is the driving force within our department. While every member of community development strives to provide citizens of the county with the best quality assistance, our current programming system is the root of many questions and concerns. These questions are just a few that we receive on a daily basis. What's the status of my permit? When was the last time my septic system has been pumped? Can I submit my application online, etc.? Next slide. The current AS400 system is outdated and extremely limited. The current permitting system contains building permit history since 2004. This does not account for planning and zoning submittals. New businesses and development are not tracked through the AS400. Permitting history is not accessible to the public or other departments. AS400 does not track plan review status or provide updates to applicants. All inspections are required to be scheduled by phone. Inspection results are not available until the end of the business day when the inspector returns to the office. The current system does not allow tracking of the septic pump out requirements set forth in our ordinance, and it's unable to integrate with an online plan review. If the Department of Community Development maintains the use of the current program, all documents and submittals will continue to be tracked in multiple programs and locations to include the AS400, Excel, written logs, and paper parcel files. Next slide. Municity 5 is a software that offers a variety of features and uses that would enhance the capability of the department. Municity system would also enhance our department's customer service by providing common information more efficiently without having to rely on paper files. It's a cloud-based, multi-platform program used by building, planning, and zoning departments. This program allows users to operate with greater efficiency and flexibility. This system would allow for all parcel history to be combined into one user-friendly program. Next slide. Municity Mobile can be accessed from multiple compatible smart devices. Would also allow inspectors to speak in inspection results or comments. Municity Mobile would also provide an ability to issue violations on site. When violations are spotted, you can generate a violation via mobile and create and/or print a violation notice and follow-up reminder. You can also integrate with iCodes to add into your violation. As a cloud-based program, Municity allows as many users as are needed. With the online access, citizens can log into a public-facing portal, view permit updates, plan reviews, inspection status, parcel history, and more. Full tracking and scheduling of inspections, including checklists, documents, pictures, etc. Mobile allows users to interact differently from an enabled device. Inspectors would have the ability to submit and upload inspection results right from the project site. Ability to integrate with GIS mapping system to pull up information on any parcel within our locality. This will allow our department and the public to access each parcel history by clicking the parcel through GIS. This will provide copies of every permit, variance, proffered division, etc. that has been submitted for that parcel. Next slide. This background in this slide is what that Municity would look like. With the GIS integration and ability to search the parcel, Municity allows a full view of parcel history to include building and zoning related projects, all combined into one location. You can view permits previously issued, permits pending approval, inspections conducted, stop work orders, violations, previous tenants and/or business that occupied the space, fees paid, contractor's license associated with the parcel, and more. Next slide. Municity can pull abutting property owners and generate notifications to those owners. This feature will be useful when notifying adjoining property owners for public hearings and projects conducted within the area. Septic info can be tracked and stored through Municity. This program would allow the ability to generate notices and maintain pump-out records in one program. Reoccurring inspections can also be used for elevator inspections or certificates that are issued once a year. Next slide. Municity can integrate with Bluebeam, which is a plan review program recently installed within community development. This integration will allow the permitting and site plan review process to be completely digital, provide citizens the opportunity to submit an application and plans online. The features previously presented are only a few among many that Municity offers. Features highlighted will be most utilized and offer the most efficient change to our department. Next slide. The quote provided describes the base Municity subscription, license charges which support the following: annual software subscription, hosting, system access, general code, and help desk, with a total annual subscription price for the first year of $82,635 and an annual recurring cost of $29,000. Next slide. Our final CIP request includes the $16,000 that the current AS400 system would charge us to download our information. Municity cost is $82,635, and then the annual budget cost every year after is $29,000, for a total of $98,635 in CIP requests for fiscal year 21-25. I also have Maria and Liz with Municity online, should you have any questions.
All right, Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think this is wonderful. And right now, we're looking at $98,635, or $98,635. But consider the number, and this is mostly for the general public. I got a feeling my colleagues understand this, but consider the cost and benefits for an employee. This system actually alleviates the need for employees at this point. That's not to say there isn't a need. Community development does a lot, and every department in our county needs staff. But this addresses a lot of staffing needs and can help alleviate that issue a little bit for them. A full-time employee with benefits would cost that, or close to it. But if that's what we have to pay now, but the recurring cost is $29,000 a year. And that's going to add so much benefit. It alleviates having to hire additional people. And whenever we do hire additional people, if we hire one or two, well, we don't have to hire 3 or 4 to do that job, is my point. So I think this is great. Thank you for putting this together. I really look forward to this rolling out.
Anything else, colleagues? Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So recall, Mrs. Hall, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I contacted you on behalf of a constituent with a question relative to a parcel and whether a special exception permit for a certain purpose that I won't mention had ever been issued/approved. And you told me that I can go in AS400, but it only goes back to a certain year, which I see now is 2004. And what did you have to do to answer my question all the way back permanently, please?
So with special exceptions, they're currently held within an Excel spreadsheet. So as you can already gather, Excel is not the most foolproof filing system that we have, as well as our paper copies. So we have an entire room full of files. Of course, with human error, they're not always where they're supposed to be. So we have to go and find those files and comb through each one of those paper files. With this new system, I, as a citizen, can click right on the GIS and pull all of that information up. Of course, that won't happen overnight, but that is our goal.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for, because I remember it did take you several hours to get back to me late, but you did get back later that day. I was very impressed.
It
but
was quick, but that's
you
unusual.
you warned me and said it may be a while because I now, after doing this and doing this and doing this, I have to physically go through every one of the folders here in the file room just to make sure the answer I'm giving you is what I think it is.
Yes, ma'am.
And then that way, if we had this, we could just send the citizen an email with a link to where it was, and then we are educating them on how to find this type of information should they want it in the future as well. And I actually was telling one of my colleagues today that a big part of our responsibility beyond budgets is educating our citizenry on how we do things and why things get done the way they do. So, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Granger?
You said it was quick for a couple hours, giving the impression it could take longer currently with the way it is.
It
Let's
has.
pretend everything's in there, and we've gotten to the point where all the documents are stored. How long would it take a citizen to access that information with the system?
The citizen would come to the front counter and work with our permit technician.
Okay.
They would have to check our Excel logs, our AS400 logs.
I apologize. I meant with the new system. How long would it take a citizen to
It
access?
should be immediate.
Immediate. Okay.
Immediate.
That's what I figured. But yes, so saving all that staff time, especially for the cost, seems like an easy call to me. I don't see any reason not to move forward with the system that would make reduce staff time doing those menial tasks and being able to just actually focus on the meat of their job as opposed to these kinds of requests. Not that they're not important, but to deal with the situation.
If I may add, it also allows us to give them complete and accurate information, because if a file is missing, I may not know that just by looking in that parcel room, which has happened in the past.
I had one other question. Obviously, it's going to take some time to get all the records in there. Do you have a plan? Let's assume the board, I imagine this will probably get approved. Do you have a plan for getting the documents in there? Do you, like a time frame thinking about that? I know it's really early. That's a hard question to answer.
Step 2,
Okay.
after the request,
Okay.
we will work with the team at Municity. They would come in, get our files, do training with our department. So it will take some time, and I don't have an accurate time frame at this moment.
I can understand if it takes a long time just to pull information. I imagine then trying to grab that and then enter it into the system after the fact would be
in an
time-consuming as well.
organized fashion so that we can find them even scanned. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
Thank you, Ms. Hall, for coming out. I think it's a great idea. I've been told that getting permits and things is kind of difficult sometimes here in King George. And people go round and around, and we get a lot of complaints about that. But I think if all the information is in there, that people can get in there. I mean, when GIS came around, I mean, that was just such a godsend to start with. But, you know, if this can be something as good as that, you know, it's a no-brainer, you know, to help you guys and to help your overworked staff. And, you know, whatever it is to make building and, you know, development here in King George more attractive, make it easier, I'm all for it.
Well, first off, I want to thank yourself and your staff for coming up with this idea and presenting it to us. I've said for a little while, we need to be more customer friendly in everything we do. And this is being customer friendly and making it a one-touch service. I know I've come into your department in my time many times, and I joked with you at the computer screen that it looked like War Games from 1984, the computer screen. So this is awesome. And then also being in your department several times, I've seen all the stacks and stacks of files and the spacing issues because you have to keep all those files. This would now put it online and the public would be able to access it, and it makes it just, once again, more customer friendly. So kudos for you to coming up with this and your staff for coming up with this. I appreciate it, and I really do think it pushes that word we keep saying, customer friendly, and making people be able to find the information themselves. So
No, you
yeah, we need a vote. Can I have a vote?
Move to approve the Municity software request from community development as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hall. And thank you for the folks that were online ready to ask our questions, even though we didn't have any questions, but thank you for being online.
Thank you very much for the support to our department.
I always thought it was MS-DOS looking at it.
I just thought of war games.
Just the green dots.
All right, next up is Circuit Court. Would you just like to address that briefly, Dr. Young?
Yes, Madam Chair. Again, we have the bond, it's been approved. We have that funding on November 15th. So that $1.4 million is actually going to go towards the design of the courthouse. And then you see in the subsequent outer years, that'll be the funding for the construction of the courthouse.
All right, thank you, Dr. Young.
Yes, Madam Chair.
And King George Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Giles online? Oh, there you go.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to present the countywide radio system upgrade project for consideration. The current public safety radio system is almost 20 years old. It's had very inadequate coverage and capacity, along with several of the crucial components of the system are rapidly coming up on the end of life, which means that no longer is supported by the manufacturer and parts will be no longer produced, which, you know, if something breaks, it'd be hard to get it replaced and repaired. We are requesting to upgrade the entire system to a 700 megahertz P25 trunk radio system. This system would not just be a public radio safety system, but a countywide radio system meant for any department in the county that has a need for two-way communications with any vehicle or personnel in the field. We propose the upgrade in 3 phases to minimize the physical impact to the county. The first phase would be the infrastructure and the public safety. The second phase would be the other county departments and personnel. And the third phase would eventually be adding the school system and the buses to the system. And then that way everybody on the system would be able to intercommunicate with each other. Some of the advantages of upgrading are we would have multiple talk groups where currently we only have 4 channels to talk to our dispatch. And that's 1 channel allocated to the sheriff, 1 for fire and rescue, and 2 that we share. Better overall coverage and in-building coverage with 3 additional sites, direct interoperability with the surrounding counties who all operate on 700 megahertz systems except for Westmoreland, who is UHF system, but that would be overcome with a radio and dispatch, and the radios we have would all be tri-band radios, which would allow direct communication with them. We would have the capacity to add on other county departments and the schools in the future if the county desired with phases 2 and 3. Security would be an improvement. Our current system has no security, which means anyone can look up our radio information on the internet and program it into an inexpensive radio and potentially disrupt our system and interfere with calls. The new system, radios will have to be authenticated before being allowed on the system, and should a radio get lost or stolen, the radio can remotely be disabled. The system would also have encryption to protect sensitive information going over the air, like patient reports to the hospital or deputies receiving information about possible wanted subjects or such when they're dealing with someone. It would have GPS, over-the-air programming, data capability, vehicle location, et cetera, just some of the other advantages. We are asking for your consideration of moving the project back up to the fiscal year 2022 and 23 budget as the retired Sheriff Dempsey had originally submitted. It somewhere along the line had gotten moved back to 24-25. With the end of the life rapidly approaching and some items already past the end of the life, you can see the urgency of moving the project ahead in the timeline. For your consideration, Motorola, just for consideration, your Motorola offers leasing in arrears, financing like we've used on other projects in the past, like the microwave replacement project we did 3 years ago to replace the microwave that was end of the year life. If approved, that would allow us to move forward with the upgrade in July of 2021 and not have to make the first payment until 2024. The preliminary budget price for the first phase is $8,088,795. We are currently working on getting a firmer price for the entire project so we could break out each phase. Just as a note, procurement has reviewed the City of Suffolk contract, and it's a writable contract, so we would be able to write off of that. And the end of the life equipment, I have a copy of them if you would like to see, and thank you for consideration. If you have any questions?
Do we have any questions? Mr. Bush?
Just for my knowledge, because I'm not an expert on communications, so how many different communication systems do we have? It seems that every budget year, every CIP, we're always talking about, and I know they're different ones. I get it, but how many do we have? And is this something that can eventually link us to one communication system across the board?
Well, that's what we're proposing is a countywide system, so everybody would be on one system, where the schools have a system, the buses have a separate system, the service authority, I think, is still using some old low-band radios. I talked to a couple of the other county departments about, their interest in being part of the system. That's the overall project, but then there's been some stuff like, 3 years ago, there was, which is still on here, there was the microwave, which is a separate part of the system, but it's what interconnects the system. That particular item was at its end of life and had to be replaced. But the good thing with that is we saw the future of that is that could be part of the system that were recommended to be replaced. So it's not like that money was just thrown away. That would be part of the new system.
Okay. And is it really necessary for, let's say, school buses and stuff to be able to be on the same radios as the sheriff's office and fire rescue?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. And one is, like with the school buses, is in the emergency operations plan, should we ever need to do a mass evacuation like for Heritage Hall or any kind of evacuation, that's what we use as the school buses. Years ago, we used to be able to communicate directly with the school buses, but the schools bought a new radio system, and now we don't have that capability. So should we ever have to use the buses, we would have to actually, put people with radios on each bus so we will be able to communicate with them. And then, lost my train of thought. Oh, about being able to communicate with the sheriff's office is good because, there's several times now, where a bus gets in a wreck, they have a fight on the bus, whatever, they have to radio to the bus garage, and the bus garage has to call the sheriff's office to report it. So, obviously that don't take a whole lot of time, but you never really know what's going on. Maybe the person at the bus garage stepped away from the radio and went to the bathroom or whatever, so there could be a delay. With this system, they would be able to just pick the radio up, flip to the talk group to the sheriff's office and call them directly. And then, if need be, if it was a fight, the deputy could switch right over to that bus and communicate directly with that bus driver.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is the first I'm hearing about a request for this project to be moved up in the capital budget. I would recommend that it be left as presented, and maybe we could revisit it next year, because at the end of the day, if the board moves this up to, you recommended 21, 22, or?
Yes.
That's going to put the board in a position where the board's going to have to make some tough decisions. And the fire rescue department's gonna have to make tough decisions as well, because that's the same time that you all are looking at building a fire station, and now we're saying, oh, we also want an $8 million radio project on top of that, but we can't do both, So we gotta, I would recommend we leave it as presented so we can have a realistic CIP planning document.
And we're gonna have an Engine 3 coming up eventually too.
Yeah, but none of that stuff's not any good without a communication system to be able to talk. The sheriff did bring it up at the planning commission about moving it up. I guess nobody acted upon that, so. And like I said, one of the good things is with that, we would hope we would stick with Motorola. That's who we've been with for years. And they do have that financing in arrears, where if it was approved next year, you wouldn't pay for it for 2 years in advance, like we've done on some of the other projects.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Kupka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was going to ask you, Chief, if you could explain that financing in arrears to us again, because as I moved my little circle around $8,088,795, I put it in, not in 21, 22, I put my arrow in 22, 23. But you said it would be there, but that it would allow you to, in 21, to go ahead and start the financing in arrears and implement. So walk us back through that again slowly so I catch everything, please.
Well, the leasing in arrears is basically, if we approved a project today, then basically it would be 2 years before the first payment would be due, is the way it works. Is the way we've done, like the 911 upgrade, the microwave upgrade was done that way. That's just 2 of them that I recall. But that's how it's done, is that, so what the sheriff had requested was 21, 22. Even though, the first payment would be 24, even though you could probably move it back a year, and it would still be 2 years, that you would be able to start the project if it was approved.
So to add on to that, so when you approve this, you can't approve it piecemeal. You have to approve it, I'm guessing, all together because you need the same radios, the same equipment. I understand some of this because this is what my dad did in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, is communications for fire department, rescue, emergency management. So I understand it has to be all, because they have to be all compatible. So if we made this choice, we're obligating $8 million. Am I correct?
Yes. It's just a matter of when you would.
Not correct. Not correct.
Okay.
When you lease, which I'll never recommend, I learned that very quickly when we first came aboard. We enter into a lease with Motorola. When you lease for that $8 million, the board, you're going to end up spending almost $11 million. They're going to tax you for, holding that money and not receiving a payment. And that's the real cost associated with going into leases. And if we're going to pursue such a large project, I would always recommend, hey, well, we might as well go get the financing ourselves because our credit is great. We don't have to pay almost 1.5 times more for the project because we can't afford to move forward with our own financing.
With that, I was going to ask that next. So these are leased, they're not owned.
Well, they're leased to own.
Leased to own,
Yes.
Okay. Sort of like rent-a-center.
I can't speak fully to the whole, Dr. Young may know more about the whole leasing process than I do, but I know that you could approve it and then, the first payment wouldn't be due for 2 years.
But that the 2 years would start the paying back that amount, 8 million, 11 million, whichever it is,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
The interest runs while that payment.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. The interest runs, like any 0% in, credit card. Mr. Bush?
So the one thing that I deal with is contracts and financing that I am a subject matter expert on. It's a raw deal. I absolutely agree with what Dr. Young said. This leasing in the rears, it's all to make money. And it sounds good. We're also going to be hitching this on the back of a future board and obligating this to them. If we're going to do this, we just secured 2.19% for a bond. That's insane. And the market looks to be holding that trend. So if we were to do something like this, I would rather go that avenue. But with that said, I don't like the idea of pushing this forward either. I think we should leave it the original time frame. But if we were to move forward, I would be against the lease to own, and I would say we pursue a bond. But with that, our landfill is already leveraged by a debt service. We just pulled a bond for the courthouse, which is a need, and it was a great situation. But at the end of the day, our availability of funds is slowly being eaten up by debt service. Now, 2 years ago, we put in a debt mitigation plan, and it was working. We had to walk away from that this year in our budget because we just couldn't afford it. Eventually, we do need to get back to that to be able to clear up this debt service issue. But I think we need some time to get an accurate forecast of what we're doing. I'd like to stick with the original time frame, and if we were to move forward with it, absolutely not do the lease in arrears.
I would also like to see what not lease in arrears, how much that costs, how would that add on, and that would need more information. And I'd also like the lifespan of these radios, how long that they last. I know there are different lifespans for different radios. I know from my dad. So that would also be to make sure how long did these things last and when we would have to repair them or replace them. Does anybody else have any questions?
Madam Chair, I'd recommend that if the board, I think that'd be quite enlightening to request that, hey, tell Motorola, send us a proposal with the numbers, show us what the lease in arrear costs us. And I think that that'd be especially informative for the board for decision making on such a large project.
Okay.
And to the general public. Mr. Stonehill?
This is definitely a needed piece of equipment. Absolutely. I mean, when I can't, when you can't talk to Chief Moody in the same building that far away, we have a problem with the radio system, and it's been like that for a long time. But, money's tight right now. Chief Basham, is it a all secure radio, or do you have to switch back over like the old days? For secure, like you said, people couldn't listen.
Well, they have the capability of encryption, and it's all in how you program them. You can have a channel that's encrypted all the time. You can have a channel that you can turn the encryption off and on that particular channel, or you could just have a channel that's encrypted and a channel that's non-encrypted. It's all in how they program. That's a whole lot more flexible nowadays than what it used to be.
And there's still patch availability to Westmoreland, Stafford.
Well, these radios would allow direct communications with everybody, I take that back. They would allow direct communication with everybody because the radios would be tri-band radios. So you would also have UHF in them, so you would be able to talk directly to Westmoreland.
Yeah. Grants available for any of that?
We are researching some to see if we can find anything.
I mean, that would take a lot of it off, but, I would agree that we probably need to hold off on that for right now unless we get some more numbers from Motorola grants. Would be great, but it's definitely needed. I mean, we've needed this for a long time.
Mr. Bush?
So whenever we go to build company 2, the new company 2, and we're putting the infrastructure in for that, is that something where this could be rolled into a bond for company 2?
Dr. Young?
It's definitely something that could be looked at. But again, I'd rather be able to have enough time to sit down with the sheriff and the fire chief, and we put together a deliberate plan for not only rolling it out, but also how do we finance it. And we just haven't had a chance to have that conversation yet.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because that would give us that time. We're not in a position to pull a bond on building a company 2 right now. So thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And well, you have one more, the microwave radio system, correct?
No, that's an approved project
Okay, all
already.
right. I'm just making sure, going through. Thank you. All right. Chief Moody, you're up.
I just want to speak on this project that we have recommended approval for this evening. I don't want to speak into too many details because it is part of our closed session direction that the board had provided. Happy to answer any questions that you may have about that. That project is moving forward. It's certainly a need. We do need to have a new company too, as it was stated tonight. And happy to answer any questions that you may have about that project.
Anybody have any questions? I think most of us all understand it.
Right.
And the need. Thank you.
And I certainly can go into detail about the logistics and facility, the infrastructure if needed.
Well, you know, one of the things, since we're being very open with the public, is could you give a brief summary of why it is vital that we replace Company 2? Because some people think, oh, we already have a building, it's there. Why is it vital that we need to move that location and replace it?
Well, so the fire station that's there on Dalgren Road was built in the 1990s. The rescue station was built in 1954. Currently today, we are housing equipment in both facilities. So our firefighters literally have to get up in the middle of the night and leave one building, get in a vehicle, drive down the road, open up that building, and get like the brush truck out, get another ambulance out if it's needed. You know, these facilities were never built or attended for a 24/7 operation. You definitely have a need for a 24/7 operation now in this county. And I mean, I'll just give you an example. In the fire station, there is no eating area. There's a kitchen and there's a sofa. There is no separate male and female bunking. We have male and females in our department. We have one shower. It's you know, it was good for the time that it was built. It was a lot of community donated labor and materials and products that built these facilities. But we have outgrown them, and we've outgrown them for years. And so I will tell you, I have been on project teams building fire stations in other areas of the state. Dalgren will probably put a feather in my hat to say this is probably one of the more hardest and complex areas to put a fire station in a suitable and adequate area. If it's not a wetland issue, if it's not an owner issue, if it's not a VDOT issue, it has proved to be very challenging. We've been working on this project for more than a decade, and you know, certainly we hope that we have a good, solid location. But this money in here that we're requesting is to build on $120,000 we already have encumbered for land acquisition, and this is going to be that extra amount. So we can't build a station without the land, and the land's the first piece. So I hope, Ms. Bender, I hope that answered your question.
I just wanted to add one more thing to add on, because for Chief Mooney to understand that where our fire station is now, we cannot add on to it or remodel it because of wetlands and the Chesapeake Bay Act, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And we have looked into that option before. We can't change the footprint. And from what it's been, the way I understand it, you couldn't build that same existing station in the same location today. Okay, by the time you were to, you know, put in the entrances, have the 100-foot delineation and setback requirements, you couldn't do that. There is no stormwater retention management. There's no best management practices that are in place, and this is, of course, Heather's world more than mine. But you couldn't do that. The other piece of it is too, we want to get off Dalgren Road. Dalgren Road is getting way too busy, and it's just a miracle that we have not had an accident there as of yet. And we got to get off that road. We got a good strategic location in mind. The board knows about this location, and I think that it will suit the Dalgren Company 2 station for many years to come, and strategically as that end of the county grows.
And Chief Mooney, I asked you all these questions because a lot of the times our general public doesn't understand why the need. And that's a really good that they now know what the need is. They just have to watch this presentation and they know why it is really needed. And Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you bring up a good point about the general public needing to know why we're doing this. If you recall, there was a lengthy article in the Freelance Star, and we had a lot of people show up about the possibility of eminent domain being used because there simply was no other properties available. They, like Chief said, they've spent a decade looking for a location. Well, they found a piece of property that's going to be a private sale. There's no eminent domain. This is something that's going to serve the public. It's a need, and I absolutely applaud Chief for everything he's done, him and his team, because I know it took a team and they were able to identify something, and I'll look forward to this moving forward. And I can't wait till we're able to speak about the particulars about this in the public, but it's a great deal. So thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Do we need Dr. Young, do we need a motion on this one?
Yes, Madam
Yep.
Chair.
All right. All right, can I have a motion?
I move to approve the fire and rescue facilities request as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you to you and your team for all the work. Go ahead, Dr. Young.
So for way ahead, Madam Chair, what I'm tracking is for Parks and Recreation as presented, and when I say as presented, that's in accordance with CAO recommendation, King George County Schools, King George School roof replacement for $1,260,480, and school bus replacement for $312,000, contingent on that being able to pay for 3 school buses. Administration as presented, IT as presented, Community Development as presented, Circuit Court as presented, King George Sheriff's Office as presented, and Fire Rescue as presented. If that is the board's desire, then I would like to request that the board authorize the county staff to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 CIP budget.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Young, also to you and your staff for putting this all together.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, so our last thing is the discussion on the food trucks. And Dr. Young, I had called you earlier today to ask you to have some information. Thank you, Ms. Hall, for staying back. All of my colleagues and myself have received numerous either complaints or concerns or wants about mobile food trucks. I have to say, on my way over here tonight, I saw a mobile food truck at one of our businesses, and there were quite a few customers there getting food. So, Dr. Young, I would like you to explain some of the challenges, and then we can have our discussion. And Ms. Hall, if you could.
Yes, Madam Chair. So the King George County Code is silent on the use of food trucks. And as everybody already knows, that if the code is silent on the use, then that use is not legal. We have had, or we've been a little bit lenient on food truck use for special events like the Fall Festival and different events, even at private venues like the wineries across King George County. But the county has really held a tight hold on food trucks trying to establish a permanent presence in the community. That concern is even more of an issue now, given the current recession and the impact that this recession has had on local business. Just as you stated, Ms. Bender, that you noticed an increase in food truck presence in the county. I think that that's been noticed amongst our citizens and across the administration, and that the reason for that is deliberate. As the recession is currently impacting local businesses in King George County, naturally it's impacting businesses in surrounding communities. So those businesses in surrounding communities are going to try to artificially increase their market by going mobile and traversing into other counties to pursue a customer base. The problem with that is those businesses from outside communities are actually competing for the same customer base that our local businesses who are already invested in King George County depend on to keep their doors open. Mr. Bush so eloquently stated before, it's kind of counterintuitive if the King George County government will allow artificial competition to come into the community and compete with our local businesses, but at the same time, we're providing the small business grants to help them keep their doors open and to try to make it through the recession so we can get out on the back end and maintain our business community. So that is why the staff is really taking a harder stance, especially through our zoning office with writing letters and providing warning letters to these mobile food trucks and explaining to them that their use inside the county is not permitted, is not regulated, in addition to the fact that we are fairly certain that a lot of these food trucks aren't even coming into the county and paying a meals tax. They're taking that monies that's generated from King George County customer base, and then they take those monies out of the county and they pay a meals tax in a neighboring locality. So not only are our local businesses being, I don't want to say robbed, but are being robbed, but at the same time, the King George County government as well is not realizing revenue and is being taken to an outside locality. And in the end, our King George County citizens, depending on government services, aren't getting those services as a result of these food trucks. So we definitely understand that food trucks provide variety and they provide different opportunities for our citizens, but at the same time, it provides a hardship for our local business. And staff would like to recommend that the board provide us full support in our ability in enforcing the county's ordinance and code with the use of mobile food trucks in the King George County.
All right, I'll go down for each of my colleagues for this one. Mr. Granger.
I've heard a little bit recently, actually, about this from some citizens, and I can appreciate at least the perspective from citizens saying they would like the opportunity, especially with the current climate that we're in. But I think the concerns Dr. Young brought up are very valid, and I might be willing to entertain looking at it if we could at least generate the meals tax. But it's a two-pronged issue at the moment with food trucks coming in, where it's taken away from local businesses and from the county, and I'm not okay with that. Yeah, I'm inclined to say I'd like to continue with our current posture, but I might be willing to at least entertain it if people were willing to at least pay the meals tax, maybe at that point entertaining it. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to chime in as well.
Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the majority of people that are reaching out to us haven't had the opportunity to take everything into account, because everyone that I've talked to that was pushing for food trucks, after we spoke, they were like, I agree. And it goes back to what Dr. Young said. We have people that have invested into this county. They live in this county. And their businesses are at 50% capacity. A lot of them are failing. They employ people in King George County. We took CARES Act money and set up a grant program through the EDA to help these businesses stay alive. There's no way in hell we can allow people to come in and be a direct competition to them. Most of them not paying the tax. Now, I appreciate what Mr. Granger said, that if they paid the meals tax, but still that doesn't help our business. It gives the county some more money, but it doesn't help our businesses. So I'd like to keep, or I fully support keeping our same posture. Now, down the road, when we get out of a recession, when our businesses have recovered, I would like to see an option for food trucks, whether it be limited to certain areas or something. I think our citizens have made it known. I want variety. And a lot of restaurants or businesses start out the food truck route and they see where they can get that clientele, and then eventually they'll put up a brick and mortar. So I don't want to totally eliminate that possibility, but right now we're in survival mode, and we have to help those people that invested in our county. We have to be there for them. So I would like to, in the future, look at allowing food trucks. But I do have two questions for Ms. Hall. So Dr. Young talked about how we've been laxed. So at those vineyards or the Wine and Art Festival or the Fall Festival, if someone is to bring in a food truck, do they have to go through your office to attain a one-day permit?
They do not.
They do not. Okay.
So our current farm wineries, such as Back Porch, they have a special event venue permit, and that falls under their permit. Obviously, when you have an event, a wedding, either their caterers are going to come in with the utilization of these ag buildings. They often don't have a kitchen or things of that nature, so the food trucks are kind of their option there. However, if a business wanted to come in and get a one-day permit, that is also not something that we have.
Okay, so there is no permitting process.
No, sir.
All right, so I was on, because I gave a constituent bad information. I thought they had to go to community development to get a one-day permit. I was wrong. So thank you for, I will let her know. I gave her some bad information. Secondly, so the meals tax, that goes directly to our general fund, and they have to, the vendor brings that to the community Commissioner of Revenue's office, correct?
That money goes to the Commissioner of Revenue. What fund code that goes under might be a better question for Dr. Young.
Yes, sir, that does go to our general fund, but here's the challenge with the meals tax. The problem is we only collect the meals tax on the trucks that want to let us know that they did collect the revenue. Heather will tell you that most recently we had discovered they didn't self-report. It was discovered that there was actually trucks operating on the weekends in Claydale. Commissioner of Revenue doesn't operate on the weekends. Community Development doesn't operate on the weekends. So we had no idea if it wasn't reported by a resident. And so naturally, that was lost meals tax. They're not coming to knock on the door of the Commissioner of Revenue's office on Monday and say, oh, by the way, I sold food in Claydale on Saturday and Sunday. Here's the tax that's owed.
Yep.
So
And
it's a very challenge. They're a moving target, and it's very tough to try to address them.
so what I'll end with, besides saying I'd like to maintain our current posture on this, is I know that the schools were made aware that we don't allow this either, and that includes Chick-fil-A pop-ups coming selling stuff at the high school and then taking that money to Stafford County or Fredericksburg, wherever they came. If you want to do a fundraiser, that's awesome. We got a lot of restaurants and pizza joints. You could sell pizza by the slice or whatever, but we got businesses in King George that need some support. Thank you very much.
Before I go to Mr. Stonehill, Ms. Kupka had a question concerning something you just said. So, Ms. Kupka.
So I apologize, Mr. Stonehill. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will have some additional comments, but I just want to address something that was just said. So meals tax, actually, the way that it's collected by the state, just like the state collects the sales tax. So if you sell, and I know this from having sold at the farmer's market a few years ago, you have an account set up with our local Commissioner of the Revenue's office, but and at your point of sale, when you sell things, you collect the 5% or whatever sales tax locally. Then every month, if you have a monthly account, and most of these probably do the volume that they have a monthly account with the state, you file online with the State Department of Taxation what your total monthly sales were in each locality. And so there are boxes that you can check in your online submission. So people aren't really they're coming to our Commissioners of the Revenue Office to make sure they have a meals tax account set up with our locality so that when they file the submission online with the state and they check the box, last month I sold $100 worth of food in King George County, then the state reimburses our Commissioner of the Revenue's office, our locality, for whatever the person reported. So there's a little more to it than that. It actually is collected first by the state, just like the retail sales tax is. But that being said, Dr. Young, you are absolutely correct that if that business has not intentionally come to our Commissioner of the Revenue's office or contacted them somehow to set up that meals tax collection account, and they don't properly self-report it, if they're a Fredericksburg food truck, even though they came to King George and sold $300 worth of food, they could click the box for Fredericksburg when they report it to the state, and all of their meals tax proceeds are only going to the city of Fredericksburg. So thank you for allowing me the time for that clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Stonehill.
So I'm a little on the fence on this. I think we need to clarify it a little bit more over the years of looking at food trucks and getting complaints on food trucks and everything. If something's not on our regulations, people go, oh, if it's not there, I guess we can do it. but I think we need to do something to, clarify it or straighten it out a little bit. Unfortunately, that's just more ordinances or more paperwork we have to do. But it's certainly not fair for a food truck to show up in a parking lot at Commerce Drive, right across the street from, Jersey Mike's and Benny's and Subway and everything, and sell right there to all the contractors there, where our stores here in King George are paying their rent and they're paying their electric and they're paying their cable and they're paying all that kind of stuff. They're taking their business away, so I am definitely against that. But speaking of the vineyards, hopefully a microbrew at some point. They don't have kitchens and they have to serve food. So do we need to go in and put something in there saying that at these locations, at a vineyard or at a microbrewery or something, you go to the Commissioner of Revenue and you get get your tax license set up, you get your, peddler's license or whatever they have there, and say, yes, I'm going to be at XYZ Vineyard on, this day to sell, and then make sure that that money is then collected, because the vineyards have to have food. But they have to stay there. They're not going to be running around the neighborhoods of Claydell or, everything. I also heard that, I had a number of people call me and say, hey, there's a truck in Claydell. And then a lot of the citizens were saying, well, we don't want to go anywhere. We just want the food truck come right to us, but they won't get in their car and drive to their local restaurant where those guys are, struggling. So I think we need to put that in there, that just mobile, just stop on the side of the road is not going to be allowed. But if you're going to have a set location at a agribusiness, type thing, that might be something we need to look at and get make sure their taxes have come to us, make sure their Commissioner of Revenue is getting, there's the meals tax, because like Mrs. Kupka said, when you file your state taxes, there's a certain how many dollars at 2.5% for your meals you're getting, and then in what locality. So if you don't put down what locality you're at, that locality is not going to get their money reimbursed back from the state. And you're either doing it monthly or you're doing it quarterly. But I think it's something that we definitely need to put in there, because a lot of people are confused where they look up in the Muni codes and they go, oh, it didn't say anything about it. Let's go ahead and drop my food truck in there. So we need to expand on it. I mean, they have to. I mean, because if it's, if it's a vineyard or a microbrewery or whatever, they have to serve food there and say, yeah, I'm going to be here at this location like they have been doing in the past, and have them do it legally and get a little bit of tax revenue out of it as well. And it's helping support the vineyards. It's helping support the, whatever comes down the road brewery wise. So we need.
Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would support that too, and whether that means, fixed businesses or certain types of businesses or certain zoning districts, like not necessarily R2 or, but I just want to point out a couple of other things. So first of all, up until this sort of exploded, this issue last week really came to the forefront, and I don't mind letting the public know that I received the complaint and did pass the complaint on to community development. Until then, really, we were not purposely regulating or chasing after food trucks, because the staff in community development, and we talked about it earlier, is quite small I think for the size of our community and the volume of permits and applications and so forth that they're dealing with. So we truly have been complaint based. It's not like they have gone out looking to pick on any of these food trucks or any of our neighborhoods. Please know that. But so I did some digging about this last week when this first came up. And first of all, staff does not look to try to punish these food trucks. They send a polite letter to educate and inform either the food truck operator and or the business or property owner, because my understanding is that if you did a notice of violation, if you had to cite someone, Mrs. Hall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually the location where the food truck goes and parks. It's not the food truck operator, right?
That's correct. All zoning enforcement is done to the property owner, which also leads to further issues with compliance for those who are parking in cul-de-sacs or pulling over on the side of the road, et cetera. But you're correct.
Exactly. So then we don't want to have the zoning office to be issuing notices of violations to, say, other businesses of ours who just happen to not know, what the fact that is, if it's not actually stated in there, it is not permitted. It is not allowed. So we certainly don't want that. Our staff certainly does not go looking for this. It is, again, complaint driven. And another complaint, my understanding, was received today about a different neighborhood having a food truck come in. So I would point out, as my colleagues have stated, our businesses are struggling, particularly, our brick and mortar businesses, particularly our restaurants. Per the governor's executive order, the restaurants are still only allowed to operate at 50% capacity. So for me personally, until we can get over that hurdle, I do want to see us allow for the ability to have some food trucks come into the county, maybe in designated locations or certain zoning districts. But until we can get past that, I personally can't go for that, because we just have too many brick and mortar businesses that are suffering. I would also point out, and I shared this data with my colleagues, but I want to make sure the public is aware as well. Last week when this first came up, I reached out to the Commissioner of the Revenue's office to see if any of those food trucks that have standing meals tax accounts to collect the meals tax are actually King George owned and operated businesses. I was provided with a list of 15 that do have meals tax collection accounts, and not a single one of those food trucks is a King George owned, operated business. I do like the idea of, we passed the microbrewery ordinance, and their business model heavily depends on the use of food trucks and being able to offer some food options. So I'm interested in looking into this in the future and definitely continuing the conversation. But for me personally, this is just not the time. Thank you.
I would agree with all the things my colleagues have said, but I would like to see if we could further research it and whatever we need to do with our ordinance for in the future. And I can see both sides. I've got some of those emails from a couple of constituents and people I've known a long time. And I understand there is some fear about going out for some people to get food and to venture out. But there are other services. But our businesses are hurting. And our businesses are coming to us for CARES Act funding. And a lot of these mom and pop restaurants, they employ a lot of our youth that need jobs, or moms with a second job, or some of our underserved community, that's their source of employment. So I don't want to hurt these restaurants that are employing our citizens, especially might be some of the people that don't have a lot of cash. So that's one of the things for me. And this is a tight, walk the fine line, but I'm not really, I wanted to bring this on the agenda so we had the conversation and we can cue the public to, discuss it. But it's an issue that's been brought to our attention. An ordinance manual, as Ms. Hall knows, is quite large, so we aren't experts on every part. But if we could at least continue the conversation and bring up more information that we could talk about it in the future, that would be great. Mr. Granger.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I was just going to ask, I know there's a plan for us to revisit our ordinances in the near future. Do we just want to request that this be put on that list of things to entertain in order to update in particular.
That's where I was going on this.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. I think we're good.
Madam Chair, that concludes the staff's presentation for tonight.
Thank you. We'll have a motion for adjournment. In the high school.
17th of November, is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Is that the high school?
Mhm.
That's correct.
I move to adjourn until Tuesday, November 17th at 6:30 p.m. in the King George High School auditorium.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion is